Welcome to Sakshi TV. I'm your host, Geeta Chopra. Thank you for tuning back in for the special coverage for the U.S. elections. Today I'm going to be interviewing Mark Razzoli, who is running for Congress in New Jersey's 12th district. He also brings 26 years as a retired police officer to the show. So ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mark Razzoli.
Thank you, Geeta. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we're so happy you're here, and I'm excited to talk to you. We're going to be talking about last night's debate as well. And before we do that, let's just welcome you and give a little bit of a background on yourself. Why are you running for Congress?
Well, I'm running for Congress because I love America. I think there's too many individuals in Congress right now who don't love America. They're more concerned about their radical policies and pushing forward their own radical agenda. You know, I'm running for Congress because I want to fight for the American people. I think the fact that we have individuals who apologize to Iran because we eliminated terrorists, or apologize to China, or sponsor BDS movements against Israel, one of our most valued allies in the Middle East, I think it's unacceptable. And my opponent also supports those types of things. So, I'm running for Congress because people elect representatives. They don't elect activists. And I think it's time to have representatives in Congress.
Okay, wonderful. And we're going to talk a little bit more about your background as a police officer. But first, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you were part of the Democratic Party, and now you're running on the Republican ticket. So what prompted that?
Yeah, well, I walked away from the Democratic Party because of it's been hijacked by these radical socialists. Party is now one of illegal immigration, embracing the criminal elements of society. They're about power, as we've seen over the number of months. They're also about violence. Obviously, as a retired member of law enforcement, I'm opposed to that. I spoke out against the illegal immigration aspect of it, and I think it's time that good people in this country need to push back, and the way you push back is by joining me, going to the polls, doing your vote by mail, and voting. That's how you send a message. Okay.
And now, Mark, you mentioned, you made a statement about the Democratic Party has been hijacked ever since JFK, so no longer has those sound values. So can you elaborate by what did you mean by that?
Yeah. So JFK Democrats, the Democrats who I grew up with, was always about serving the country, the community, putting public safety first, national security. Now, as you can see, like I said earlier, it's all about illegal immigration, open borders, putting our country at risk. I mean, after 9/11, we should have learned from these things. Now, we're going backwards now. The radical socialists, and I blame the Democratic leadership because they didn't have the intestinal fortitude to stand up to these people, because at the end of the day, it's all about identity politics. That's all they're concerned about, is the votes. They want to sacrifice public safety for votes, and to me, that's unacceptable.
Okay. Now, let's talk about fiscal conservatism, because I know that was a huge topic on the debate, the economy. So what are your thoughts on big government?
So obviously we need to reduce the size of government, especially here in New Jersey. I think we have too much government. I mean, we don't have a revenue issue. We have a reckless spending issue. And I think, one thing I could speak about here, I'm also a councilman in Old Bridge, New Jersey. And, we have fiscal responsibility here. We're one of the few municipalities who have come out of this pandemic, and we're still in a good position financially. That's done by having, being transparent and just applying common sense. You just can't keep funding and raising tax your way out of problems. It's all, at the end of the day, when you look at everything, it's about common sense. It really is. It's not about, political aspirations and political power. You really need to apply common sense to be fiscally responsible in government.
So you're saying you can't tax your way out of problems. That's a good way to put it.
Right. Oh, you cannot tax your way out. The more, it's a never-ending cycle. The more you tax, you just keep taxing and taxing. That's why New Jersey has the, the highest outward migration in the country.
Wow, wow. And that's, again, because of the high property taxes, is that right?
Everything. Governor Murphy he raised tolls, gas tax, property tax. I mean, I don't think there's a tax in existence that he hasn't raised. Pretty soon, I'm sure he's going to tax the air we breathe.
Wow. Okay, so what about the Trump administration? How has the Trump admin cut regulation in your eyes, and how has the economy responded to that?
Well, I think obviously the economy was doing fantastic before the China virus hit. Obviously reducing taxes and keeping corporations here so there's jobs, also bringing them back is important. But, I think people should not also underestimate the fact that, President Trump, his national security policies and supporting public safety is also important. I think people don't realize how important national security and public safety is. Public safety, it drives the local economy. When you've seen a lot of cities had economic resurgence, that's because they became safe. And look at the cities that aren't safe. Their economies don't exist. It's non-existent. So I think it goes hand in hand. And I think President Trump isn't given enough credit for his national security and public safety policy, which also drives our economy. I think we all seem to forget, when terrorist attacks cause stock markets to crash.
Yeah. And even with COVID, I believe you were saying that because we had such a strong foundation in our economy, we were able to sustain it. We would have been much worse off if we didn't have that foundation that he provided in the first 3.5 years of his presidency.
I agree. I mean, he's done a great job, especially in the circumstances.
Oh, yes. I mean, these are trying times and uncertain. No one could have predicted this, and we've never been in a situation like this and possibly never will be. So I want to talk about your experience as a police officer. What would you say to people out there in anarchy who are burning down buildings, committing arson, looting companies, and all in the name of whatever the name is? But who are these people? Are these people peaceful protesters? Are they law abiders? Are they criminals? Should they be punished by law? What would you say to them?
Well, let's say they're domestic terrorists. Let's say for what it is.
So now we have domestic terrorism.
Right. They're domestic terrorists. You show up to any type of event with an incendiary device to throw and light things on fire, to use lasers to blind law enforcement, to hurt anyone, to be killing people in the streets. You're domestic terrorists. Antifa, BLM, they're domestic terrorist groups. They need to be treated as one. I keep calling for the federal government to apply the RICO statutes to them. They are organized crime. We see it. And when you see pallets of bricks and stuff being dropped prior to rioting and to be used as weapons, listen, it's a well-organized group. They're led by terrorists. I mean, let's not hold that back. That's a fact.
Now, in your opinion, if they're not kept in check or if they are not stopped right now, as you and I speak, what happens next? Where's the future? Where's all this going?
Well, listen, it's going to continue to escalate until it's stopped. And the way you stop it is by arresting people. I think, a number of years ago, I don't know if you remember, approximately 750 people decided they were going to block a bridge in Manhattan. Giuliani's police chief locked up all 750 of them. They need to be arrested. They need to be charged. And on a federal level, this way you don't have the local courts with their bail system now, which basically walks people in and out the door. The federal system, it's a lot more strict when it comes to bail being set on these criminals. So I mean, there's no bail reform in the federal system. So federally, I think they need to be charged federally. They're interfering with commerce. They're just obstructing all kinds of public passages. I mean, you name it, they're doing it. You went over it. Just the fact that they're murdering people indiscriminately on the streets, it's unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, this is murder, this is manslaughter, this is arson, this is robbery, and basically aggressive assault, or I don't know what the word would be, but yes, or aggravated assault. So, I mean, I'm surprised you're not raping women out there, that's probably next. So, I mean, I'm just concerned with that. So I wanted to get your opinion as a police officer on how you see the end of this. So you're saying they have to be arrested in order for this to stop.
And before we go into the next, I just want to close real quick by saying it's time to stop handcuffing law enforcement. The idea is to handcuff the criminal, okay? Stop being so concerned about selling out public safety for votes. Joe Biden, he wasn't concerned about the rioting until his poll numbers started dipping. So, everybody out there, common sense has to apply. You're going to hear me say a lot, but it's true. It's about common sense. We cannot allow this in our communities. Public safety is the foundation.
So you're definitely an advocate for public safety now. What would you say to Joe Biden regarding his response in last night's debate? I believe his answer to the violent protesters reverted back to calling Donald Trump a racist. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I've been called a racist because of my stand on this. Listen, that's the left's mentality. If they can't defeat you on facts, when in doubt, they get backed into a corner. They come out and they call you a racist. They try to pit one community against the other. That's not leadership. Joe Biden.
That's divide and rule. So you're saying they divide and rule.
Exactly. Joe Biden's not a leader. He's a political parasite. He's been in government for 47 years. So you mean to tell me, what has he been doing the last 47 years? Give me 4 more years and I'll fix the country. I'll fix politics. Listen, this is all about political power. Joe Biden was not concerned about the rioting and the domestic terrorism that's going on until his poll numbers started dipping. He's an absolute fraud.
Okay. And now to the Black Lives Matter movement, what would you say to them?
Yeah, the BLM. Well,
yes.
When you get jobs, you can tell the rest of us how to do jobs. Maybe if you had a job and wasn't out protesting and stealing and rioting and being terrorists, we wouldn't have this issue. But you are domestic terrorists. And like all domestic terrorists, I can assure you from just having the experience of working with the great men and women and the brave men and women of all law enforcement agencies, whether it's federal, state, county, local levels, they are going to find out who you are and you will be arrested at some point.
Yeah, and I'm just surprised in my mind, and maybe you can shed some light onto this, as why arrests have not been made yet by the Trump administration. I mean, because typically in the United States, when you break the law, you break the law. And we are, a crime is punishable by law. We have a legislative branch. So I don't know, maybe you can shed some light onto that, is why are people getting away with all this criminal activity in the streets?
Well, I think the problem is a lot of the local socialist, radical democratic leadership in these states and municipalities are obstructing the law enforcement community.
They're obstructing justice, so to speak, but you're saying that the Democratic governors and mayors are not allowing for that, so there's no federal mechanism to arrest these people?
Well, here's what I tell everybody. I'll tell you the same thing. Just be patient. Investigations have to run its course. And I've been involved with investigations before where people want to see immediate results, but that doesn't always work well as far as prosecuting. Sure, you can go arresting someone with minimum evidence, but then there's a chance, it'll be weak in the courtroom. So have patience, and I can assure you that the brave men and women are doing a thorough investigation. Video is very time consuming to review it and everything, just from my experience. So I can assure everyone when arrest comes, it's going to come swiftly, and it's going to just have a snowball effect, and a lot of people will be going to jail. Okay,
and again, just as a moderator, I just want to make it clear, I do have plenty of African American friends, including churchgoers. So I'm not on one side or another in terms of race. I'm from a minority group, visible minority, and I'm female. So I would just say that we're talking about crime here. We're talking about people who are committing crimes in the street. It doesn't matter what race they are. So, and then I did watch the attack of the CNN building in Atlanta just back in, I think it was in June or May, and they ended up there. So, these are all things that are captured on camera, like you said. So I suppose you know more than we know, and you're saying just be patient because the crimes will be punishable. So that should provide some relief for people out there who are concerned with law and order. Now, on that note, in the debate, they did talk about law and order. So what is your stance that if Trump does not win, what is the future of law and order in this country?
Well, I think Joe Biden and his radical allies want to change law enforcement in a way that's really not conducive to protecting the communities. Mm-hmm. You can't send non-police personnel to crime scenes before you know what the scene actually is happening. What's happening at the scene. So I think one of the most dangerous calls any member of law enforcement can go on is a domestic dispute, and then it will tell you that. So to send a social worker there is really putting that individual in peril and risking his or her life. So I think Joe Biden based upon what he's been saying up until his poll numbers started dropping, wants to defund the police. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. His allies in Congress want to defund the police. And the problem is they don't understand public safety. Okay. And I'm going to say, so I'm very clear to people. Sometimes to keep a community safe, you're going to anger some people. We have to, I have stopped people who fit a description, and I've apologized to them. Listen, thanks for your cooperation. Have a great day. It happens, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, it's all about protecting the good people in the community. Sure, the criminals don't want us there. Of course not. I think it's time that elected officials start being representatives instead of being so concerned about votes. I mean, stop making zeros into heroes. Start worrying about the single mom walking down the street, after 16 hours at work. She should feel safe. She should be able to go to the corner store, as well as the senior citizens in our communities. It's about protecting our children. We've seen a lot of children being hit with stray bullets in a number of states and cities. I mean, that has to be unacceptable. And we have Joe Biden and his allies who seem not to be concerned about that. They're more concerned about votes. You saw it in the debate last night. When in doubt, let's go to the white supremacy. Let's start calling people racist. Listen, President Trump condemned white supremacists. I have personally condemned it with press releases. Any domestic terrorist group who wishes to harm anyone because of religion, race, or anything else, they are domestic terrorists and they should be dealt with accordingly. Right.
And, it's just talking to me as a voter. So suppose I'm a voter. How is it plausible to defund the police? I'm still not able to wrap my head around that. So, Don Jr. made a statement on Fox News during the RNC, and he said that you don't want to call 911 and get a voicemail. So I'm trying to understand how this, in reality, how will it work? Because and I have respect for you as 26 years in law enforcement. So if we do defund the police, what are some of the side effects of that? And I know you covered it, but can it work at all? Can it work?
Well, it can't work. There's enough studies out there where you defund the police or lay off any member of law enforcement, instantaneous increase in violent crime.
Don't we need more police officers on the street now because of all the violence that's taking place? Or do we need more anarchy?
Well, I think here's what it's like when they invented CompStat, right? So you have specific areas where it's high crime. That's obviously where you would redeploy your resources, such as narcotics or the street crime unit, to get that crime under control. Right now, we have specific cities throughout the country who have a serious issue with domestic terrorists. Well, we can deploy our federal agencies there. Unfortunately, you have these radical socialist democratic mayors who rather have the domestic terrorists and the rioting, and it's all for political reasons. Listen, you really are about your community. If the White House called you and said, do you need the National Guard? Do you need federal agencies? Of course you would say yes. It's common sense, right? As an elected official, I take an oath, right? My number one responsibility as elected official is to protect my community. People should demand that and expect it. And if
right. And that's what I'm saying. So if I'm a voter, I'm demanding that. I don't want to. There's a fire. You call a fire truck. You call 911. Whoever you're calling, you're going to call the cops. That's my right. I would demand that as a voter. I don't care what party I'm from. I'm independent. I'm whatever I am. But that's my right, and that's your right as well for all the viewers. So
I can tell you, people out there, you should expect that from me. And if anyone ever didn't receive that, please reach out to me right away. I would never, ever accept, a voicemail on the other end of 911. That's just absolutely unacceptable.
Then the country has failed. So then there's something seriously wrong. We're not in America anymore. That's just a different landscape.
Well, how is defunding the police working out in Minneapolis? It's not working out too well right now. Yeah. So I think, you can use these different reference points for that.
Yes. And thank you for all your valuable insight on this, because again, you just being in law enforcement I really wanted to kind of pick your brain at this topic to see how it would work in utopia where we didn't have police. So I wanted to kind of explore both sides of the spectrum. Now, let's talk about the race card. So, as you mentioned earlier, that's something that Biden pulled out of his pocket, and or when he was backed in a corner, so he came out with the race card. I think that was his answer to everything that you just spoke about. Now, you're from the Republican Party, so in your opinion, does the Republican Party help immigrants and minorities?
Listen, I think we're about helping human beings. We don't differentiate between race, but yeah, I think for people who want to do that, it's just a self-serving political reasons. It's all about identity politics. I think that's where the problem started. When you had the radicals start overtaking the Democratic Party, it went right into identity politics. If you recall, over a year ago, what was the big issue? It was illegal immigration. You know, how many candidates were down on the border bringing people over illegally? This was members of the Senate, for God's sakes. And once their poll numbers dipped, what happened? They slowly moved away from that. You haven't heard anything about the border in a long time from a lot of these candidates. So, that's what it really comes down to.
Okay, so you're saying the confluence of the radical left and socialism brought about identity politics in the Democratic Party. So kind of went extreme on the economy, so socialism bordering communism, and then they're basically they're splitting people up by identifying. Is that what you're summarizing?
100%, because socialists cannot win an election in this country, so they had to overtake the Democratic Party. And the best way for them to try to get votes is by identity politics. Let's, pick black first, white, Spanish first, white. You understand, the cycle goes on and on and on. So if they're not problem solvers, they're problem creators.
Okay. Now, let's talk about, in your opinion, what is the future of the Democratic Party if this continues? So this growth rate that you're talking about of radical socialism and identity politics. Let's just say in a world where Trump does not win in November 2020, what happens?
Well, I think socialism will continue to spread throughout. It's already taken over their party. I mean, Joe Biden was in denial last night.
Why do you think they're in denial? So you're saying that it's like a virus that spread, but if I'm a socialist, I'm going to be a proud socialist. It just so happens that I'm a capitalist and I speak openly about capitalism. So if they're socialists, why would they try to hide it?
Well, Joe Biden's trying to hide it because Joe Biden knows that to win an election, he can't go full socialist. He's trying to appease two factions within the Democratic Party. The Democrats, those traditional Democrats that are still left, not many, and then along with the radical socialists who are pushing hard, the OACs of the world, the Squad, people who, those individuals who want to tear down our country.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, they're the ones who are really enjoying the violence in this country because they're all about dividing. They're not about unifying. You saw that during the 9/11 ceremonies. How many ceremonies were canceled in person because it was getting close to the election? They didn't want a ceremony that would have unified America. They didn't want Americans to remember again. I could tell you, America was so unified after 9/11. And they would cancel these. You don't cancel things like that. You want to unify the country. And they're not about unifying the country.
Right. And, well, the party's not unified, and I want to reflect on that for a moment because I believe that Joe Biden has been having a hard time marrying the old Democrats that you spoke of, perhaps the baby boomers from the JFK era, to today's millennials, because the two of them have extremely, almost different views, right? I mean, there's radicalism, like you mentioned. So do you think he has done a great job with marrying these two groups within the same party?
Joe Biden has done a horrific job. Joe Biden will say or do anything to get himself elected. So he was appeasing that radical side for so long. Now, once he came out of the primary, so he had to come up with a new way to deceive the American people. So he's trying to, he got on the stage last night, he was trying to say, I never said I wanted to defund the police. He was actually saying, President Trump was saying that. So, I mean, it's outrageous to think, and it's so insulting to the American people. Listen, the radicals in this country need to be stopped. And the way they're stopped is, the way good people stop things like this is going and voting.
Voting. So your message today is to vote. Now, I want to also talk to you about, when I say China, Russia, and North Korea, these are countries that Trump has stood up to, whether it's economically or politically or just national security wise. So what comes to your mind?
Evil. I think they're, evil countries. I think, China is, I think, surpassing Russia as far as trying to do the United States harm. I also think when you talk about Trump and his national security policies, the world is a better place when America leads, whether it's, through force or sometimes keeping our military strong, and that perception of that does a lot throughout the world. I think we've seen that. I think under Obama, he weakened the military, and we saw what the effects of that were.
Do you think that's going to happen again with Biden because they're from the same party with China, Russia, and North Korea?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Does any American out there who's going to be watching this, would you want Biden across from any of these, dealing with any of these countries at all? I wouldn't. God help us. I mean, Joe Biden is incompetent. He's shown that. His son. Listen, his son has a lot of ties to these countries that come under question. So I think that really, makes Joe Biden a threat to our country economically.
So you're saying Joe Biden would really be a threat to national security?
Oh, absolutely. He has a son who has financial interest in these countries.
I see. Yeah, and I know that came up on the debate as well. Okay, well, in closing, I want to talk to you a little bit about you as a police officer, or I guess former police officer. So what would you say to all the people out there who are basically, just continue to do what they're doing? And I know you spoke to that earlier about that they will be put in check, but the underlying thought in their mind, or the premise on which they're operating off of, even the whole defund the police movement, is that police officers are racist and are bad people. Now, I called you in as an insider or somebody from the police force. What is your response to that? Have you ever come across police officers who have abused their power, or is there a couple bad apples in the bunch? Like, well, what's your take on all this?
Well, first, we target criminals. We don't target by race. When we go to roll call, we don't, the supervisor doesn't say we need to arrest this amount of, this many of this race, that many of that race. It's all about going out and finding criminals. Sure, there's bad people in every profession. I think we see that in the media where they get away with lying to the public every day. CNN's known for it. And unfortunately, when there's a bad cop, it's what sells. It's the headline of the day. I think, men and women in law enforcement, we don't become police officers to get rich. We
Right.
enjoy going out there. It's something you're born with. That's why I retired from law enforcement, right into the politics. It was an easy transition for me because I just have that to protect and serve in my system. It's something that we love to do. So I could tell the people out there, no one's out to hurt anyone. Sometimes when you go to arrest someone, it doesn't always look pretty. But with that said, we have a right to stand our ground. If you leave your house with an illegal firearm, there's a chance you might not go home. If you resist arrest, there's a chance you and the officer might not leave. You don't know if you have, no one ever knows what your underlying health conditions are. I think we've seen that take place during struggles. So my piece of advice for everyone, if you're told you're under arrest, cooperate with the police officer. You'll have your day in court. You can have your day in internal affairs if you feel that you were unjustly arrested. But I think the media has vilified the law enforcement community along with elected officials in order to get votes.
So the media has almost made the law enforcement officials evil, or they have basically bullied them, their image in the media. Is that what you're saying?
100%.
Okay. Because there were some people who have said on CNN clearly, to African-American people who have said they are scared to let their son leave the house and they have to worry about their life if they leave the house.
Well, that's absolutely a ridiculous thing to say because...
Now, I'll just say, I'm of a visible minority and I'm not scared to leave my house, but I would say if I was doing something wrong, if I was hiding something in my trunk, or if I knew I had something, or I was looking for a fight, then yes, I would be scared to leave my house. So I think it goes back to what you said about common sense. And again, I'm not taking anyone's side here. If you are not doing anything wrong, you should not be scared to leave your house if you are from a visible minority group in the United States. So would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Listen, members of law enforcement don't want to have any type of negative interaction with anyone.
Because they don't want that. So yeah, what I'm getting from you is that they want it less than the other people because it's time, it's money, it's effort. It's basically a waste of time for everybody. And it's inefficient and it's useless. It's purposeless.
Absolutely. But I also want to let people know, and in the United States, we're the most highly trained law enforcement in the world. We're constantly being trained, and especially in the area where we're here in New Jersey, New York area. You know, I've been into all kinds of schools, and I can tell you that we're well trained, and no one's looking for any type of negative interaction with anyone. You know, this is law enforcement is the only profession you can go from drinking a glass of iced tea to being shot at or going into another situation, get into a car chase. So I can tell you that me personally, I've literally told people in the community, listen, you have a traffic warrant, go up to court and pay for it so you don't get stopped and someone arrests you. Because you know what? That was the way I handled it. I like to have that interaction where when something happened, people felt comfortable coming to see me and give me information who the bad guy was. You know, it's about working with the community. So I think, you know, that false narrative that CNN's of the world, CNN's really done a lot of damage to this country. We need to say it for what it is. They're reckless. They lie. You know, if I lied as much as CNN did, I would have lost my job.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for that insight. And so, yeah, I want to thank you today for coming on the show, Mark Razzoli for U.S. Congress, New Jersey's 12th District. And we want to wish you the best in your candidacy and thank you for your time today. And we heard it from a police officer veteran, 26 years on the insight on how the police officers are viewing what's going on today. So thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And viewers, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow me for next week's interview. Thank you.
Thank you.